Okay, here we go. We're at the Wild Robot Escapes by Peter Brown. Again, I believe we're on we're on chapter 31. Okay, so here we go. I'll try to get 5 chapters in today. I'll see how the time works out. All right, so chapter 31, the campfire. Wood smoke billowed up from the backyard and drifted across the farm. Roz was building a campfire for the Sharifs. In her old life, the robot made fire by cracking special stones together until she got a spark. In her new life, she used a lighter. The family sat around the rippling flames and gazed up at the stars. The dog stretched out on the warm ground. The robot was standing nearby, but her thoughts were far away. Her computer brain was scrolling back through memories of campfires and stargazing with Brightbill. Fluffy white marshmallows were skewered onto the ends of sticks and then roasted above the flames. The children laughed as their marshmallows caught fire. They liked them charred on the outside and gooey on the inside. Their father preferred his evenly browned. When the Sharifs weren't stuffing their mouths, they were chatting happily. "That's the space station," said Jaya, pointing to a tiny dot that was slowly moving through the sky. "I can't believe people live there." "Animals live there too," said Jad. "The station has a farm. We should bring our cows up and show those space farmers how it's done." "I think our cows are perfectly content right here on Earth," said Mr. Sharif, "and so am I." Once the marshmallows were gone, Jay and Jad snuggled up with Oscar, stared into the flames, and asked their father about the old days. But the children were just too cozy to stay awake for long, so Mr. Sharif spoke to Roz instead. "We made campfires all the time when I was a boy." The man poked the coals with his marshmallow stick, and glowing embers floated into the air. "The whole family would sit around like this, telling stories. We had a nice life here, and then my brother and sister moved to the city. My parents got old, and everyone except me expected me to take over the farm. I couldn't run this place by myself," he went on, "so I hired Jamila. I did the farm work, and she managed the business. We made a good team. Then we fell in love. When Jamila was pregnant with Jad, we bought a few auto machines to help out. When Jaya showed up, we bought a few more. If I had known one of those machines would be the death of her," and the farmer's voice trailed off. Roz wanted to know more about Jamila, and about Mr. Sharif and about the rest of his family, but a normal robot wouldn't ask personal questions, so she kept her questions to herself and dropped another log on the fire. Chapter 32, The Old Barn. Long ago, Hilltop Farm was a very different place. The original farmers grew vegetable gardens, and fruit orchards. They raised chickens and sheep and goats. The farm had changed a lot since then, but there were still signs of its past. Low stone walls lined some of the fields, a rusty tractor sat in the weeds, and hidden within a densely wooden grove was an old barn. The barn hadn't been used in generations. Over the years, trees had quietly grown up around it, and moss had spread across its roof. But the barn was still strong and solid, and Roz wanted to take a look inside. The big barn door screeched along its rails. "Hello?" said the robot, peering into the darkness. "Is anyone here?" A mouse squeaked and scurried out of sight, and then Roz had the barn to herself. She stepped through the doorway and switched on her headlights. The vast interior was crisscrossed with thick wooden beams. Stairways and ramps led up to lofts and platforms. Lanterns hung from hooks on walls. Old-fashioned farm equipment lay here and there. The barn still had a faint smell of farm animals, even though none had lived there in ages. A large trunk sat at a work table, covered in dust. Roz carefully opened the lid and examined its contents. Collection of farming magazines, a pair of leather gloves, a pencil nub, and then she noticed a small journal. The name Cyrus Sharif was elegantly scrawled across its cover. The pages were filled with its handwritten notes and hand-drawn diagrams about raising livestock and growing crops and building barns, about working the land with the help of strong animals and simple machines. Cyrus Sharif also jotted down his thoughts about the long history of farming. He believed that the modern world owed his entire existence to ancient farms. When early humans first started growing their food, those farms were small and primitive, but they supported villages, which became towns, which became cities. The writings were so wise and insightful that Roz read the journal from cover to cover. By the end, she almost felt as if she knew Cyrus Sharif, whoever he was. The journal was a treasure, and she tucked it into the pocket of her tool belt for safekeeping. Chapter 33, The Autumn. Autumn colors were sweeping across the farm country. The lush greens of summer faded to reds and browns. Crops were harvested, leaves fell away, and the landscape turned to stark and gray. On Hilltop Farm, the cows were grazing on what remained of the pasture grass, while the herding machine hovered nearby. The field machine was preparing the fields for winter. The drone circled the farm several times a day, but there was less to report in autumn. Although Jay and Jed were busy with school, they always made time for Roz. The children never grew tired of listening to the robot stories, and they never grew tired of sharing their own. The bees and the mice and the deer and the frogs and the raccoons and the squirrels and the snakes were all getting ready for the cold weather. So too were the birds. The owls spruced up their nest, the crows stockpiled acorns, the swallows were still swooping over the farmland, but they would soon be leaving for winter. And any day now, other migratory birds would begin passing through on their long journeys to the south, like Brightville. Chapter 34, The Delighted Geese. A flock of geese had just landed at Hilltop Farm. It was the first flock of the autumn migration. The geese floated on the pond, cleaning their feathers and nibbling on weeds, but they all stopped what they were doing when Roz waved and said hello. The robot never forgot a face, and she was certain she didn't know any of these geese, but they seemed to know her. Before she even introduced herself, the lead goose squawked, "Is your name Roz?" The robot stared at the goose. Yes, it is." "And can you speak the animal language?" The answer was obvious, but Roz politely said, "Yes, I can speak the animal language." "Do you by any chance have a goose for a son?" "Yes, I do," said Roz. "His name is Brightbill." At that, a voice blurted out, "The stories are true!" And suddenly the flock was smiling and fluttering all over the robot. When the commotion settled down, the leader explained, "All along our migration, we've heard rumors about a robot who can speak with animals and who has a goose for a son, who is trapped on a farm. That sounded ridiculous to us, but here you are." The flock was absolutely delighted to meet our robot. They lounged around the pond for a couple days, chatting with Roz whenever she came by, and then they continued flying south to their wintering grounds. Another flock of geese arrived, and the same thing happened all over again. Roz welcomed them. They were delighted to meet the legendary robot, and then the flock continued south. Then it happened again and again. Before long, the coming and going of delighted geese was just another part of the robot's autumn routine. Straggling behind the others as usual was Wingtip's flock. When Roz saw them splashing into the pond, she felt something like hope that they might have news of her son. Sadly, the geese had no news to report, and as the flock took off and left Roz behind, she began to question whether she'd ever see Brightbill again. Chapter 35, The Memories. Roz still dreamed of escaping, of going home, of reuniting with her son, but her dreams were starting to feel impossible. She was losing hope. Was it time for the robot to accept her new life and forget her old one? Forget. Roz was troubled by that word. You see, her computer brain remembered every detail of her life on the island, and it hurt to think she might never make it back there. However, the robot could always forget. She could erase her. It would be like they never happened. The heaviness she now felt would vanish, but without her memories, who would she be? Now, Roz wanted to remember her old life, which was good because someone from her old life was about to appear. Wonder who that could be. The usual flock. All right, we will see you next time, kids.